Welcome to another episode of Stoke Meter. And it looks like our guest just had something come in on his phone. I love it. we have the pleasure of having Mark Miller on our podcast today. And Mark is a good friend of Karch. And I'm going to just pivot over to Karch. Fill us in how you do.
All right. Yep. So we probably go back, I don't know what, 4 or 5 years, maybe, Mark?
Yeah, about that.
And so when I met Mark before, we kind of worked at the same facility at the time. He was kind of in a different department, but we kind of, did a lot of work together. And then, life happens, and then I ended up doing a different job. And then as fate has it, now I'm back working where we originally met. And so again, it's probably, I don't know, again, it's like, I think I knew you a couple of years before, and then it's been a couple of years break. And then the reason I wanted to get Mark on here is when I came back, and you were a different person. I mean, it was incredible. And I don't want to say that you were a train wreck before, because you weren't. You were an awesome guy. You were an awesome guy back then, but you just, everything about you was just like, it was like version 2.0 or higher. You know what I mean? You made just such an incredible transformation. And we started talking at work here, probably a couple of weeks ago. And I've also noticed that, Mark started posting some, what I consider pretty vulnerable posts on Facebook.
Yeah.
And so, which I knew really wasn't your character by nature. And I think that's always interesting. So anyway, mashing all that together, I wanted to bring Mark on and just kind of, have you tell your story, and let's just kind of see where it goes. And so what I would like to do is turn the mic over to you, and let's go back, kind of that time frame. And it doesn't even have to be that when we were hanging out together, but, take us to the point in your life where you decided to kind of make that change, and what was going on at the time?
It's hard to get back, and I guess it's hard to get back there that quick, but I've thought a lot since we've talked this last couple of weeks. And it's, like you said, not that I was a train wreck. People couldn't tell that I was even struggling, man. Like I was just normal. I mean, nothing crazy. I mean, I did my thing and still had my friends and still did my job and just kind of living life. I looked a lot different. I was 70 pounds heavier. So that definitely, that definitely was a difference. But I think mentally, I mean, I kind of joked around the other day with my wife. Like, I feel like I hit maybe a spiritual puberty. It's weird. I just feel like, something changed. And there was a lot that led up to it. I mean, you said vulnerable, and I cringe every time I hear someone say that, because I'm just like, I'm not vulnerable. Like, stop saying that. But I mean, I guess when you think about it, like to just be open about whatever's going on, I've definitely learned that opening up is the better way for me. That happened because I was struggling, man. Like I started my job. I got a leadership position at work. Life was okay. I mean, it was stressful. It was a lot of the normal stress. And then I had a second child, and then I had a third child, and then I had a fourth child.
You've been busy.
They know what causes that, right?
Yeah. So I went from, 30 to 35, and all these changes happened. I got a house. I got people at work relying on me, kids at home relying on me, a spouse relying on me. And I just felt that pressure. I mean, it was unbearable. I mean, there was extra, callings in church. There was just everything. I mean, it seemed like if anything went wrong, it was everything went wrong.
So,
And
so it didn't mean to cut you off. As I
no,
say, one of the things that kind of that hits me though is, and we've talked about this a little before, is so you're going along, you're struggling, and you know, hindsight's always 20/20, but you just said you didn't know you were struggling.
yeah, no, I had
So
no idea.
what does that look like? I mean, how do you, that sounds kind of like a miserable existence.
I don't know if I posted this or wrote it the other day, but it's kind of like I felt like I was lost and didn't know it. But it took finding something to realize I was just wandering around. And it's like you kind of look at everybody else and you think everybody else is doing the same thing. We're all just kind of wandering around doing our thing, and everybody goes home kind of bitter at the end of the day, and everybody, you know, medicates with something. I mean, whether it's TV or alcohol or whatever, people got their distractions and their medication to cope with life. And I think it was a lot more of just getting by. It was a lot of just you know, whatever you could do to find a little bit of happiness here or there. But after a while, even the things I love, the outdoors and the hunting and all the things that I've always done and always loved doing, none of that stuff was doing it anymore.
So
There
I'm
was
wondering, Mark, I'm also sorry for cutting you off. I'm just
You're
wondering,
good.
what was it that made you realize you needed to change something? It happens a lot, right? People are it's kind of, it's not even a slippery slope. It's like, oh man, where am I? Right? Just
Yeah.
wondering what.
So I had a lot of, I had my wife, my parents, and different church leaders, people, you know, kind of noticing, and I would express it. I've always been able to express to close people, but not to everybody like I've been doing.
Sure.
And I would express to my wife that I was down, or that I, you know, my parents or my sister, tons of people, and even some close friends, and people would be like, well, have you ever considered medication? And I, you know, I thought about it, and
Yeah.
it was definitely an option. You know, I was just like, yeah, maybe, but I think being a man, it was like, no, I'm not gonna go get medicated. Like, you know, no way.
Yeah.
And so it was an option, but for me, it wasn't at the same time. So I was fighting that. And then my wife, who's a nurse, was like, you know what, we send people to different places and they get help and all these things. And so it was, people were trying to help me, but I just wasn't ready for their help.
Yeah.
And then finally I got to a low, and I posted this too, but I had went to go out and go shooting, which I'd done a lot. And Maggie was just worried about me, and she was concerned for my well-being. And so knowing that I was in that kind of shape, I was like, okay, I got to do something. Like, even as tough as I wanted to be, I wasn't being tough anymore. And so it broke me down, and we went to I told her I didn't want to just go to any doctor's office. Like, I wanted to go to a specialist or something. We ended up going to Palo Verde Behavioral Health or something. Like, I guess, you know, that's a common place for people to go for behavioral stuff. And then I got there and I realized right away I was in the wrong place. I mean, it was like hold my baby close, and it was, the doors are all locked, and it was a scary place, man. And like, I felt real uncomfortable there. And then they sat me in a room and they interviewed me. And I realized in the interview, like, I'm not broken. I'm not going to hurt anybody or myself, or it was just this feeling that just came over me that I was not broken. And prior to that, my wife had been telling me that basically, you know, in these last days, that there's a curse of hopelessness. And that struck me. I mean, that statement, and then knowing that I wasn't broken, there was just this realization that I lacked hope. And that realization was the turning point. That was the okay, now I know what's wrong. Now I can fix it. And there became a quest basically for me to fix that, to go with that, and to use that. And it's in everything now. I mean, it's in everything.
You know, it's funny too. It's just one of the things that so many times in business, they, especially when we're working with a potential client or we're talking about a business strategy and such, one common thing, I've heard this over and over, and I've mentioned it too, is we go, as they're making a strategy, they're going, hope is not a strategy. Right. And so we've kind of, if you will, we've wussified what hope really can do. And it's amazing that you say this, because a lot of people don't see it as a malady. At least all the tough guys I see, and of course I had to go look at your Facebook post. You have bobcats in there, you have coyotes in there, you're shooting stuff, and you're a manly man.
And that's the honor that I wanted to keep, but it's like, I'm still that person.
yeah, and you
but,
are. Yeah,
but there's so much more to life than just being tough.
Yes. Yes.
Well, and I think that's one of the things that's really interesting is, did you grow up in that area in St. David?
Yeah, I grew up in David, yeah.
Okay, so I for those of you who don't know, I grew up in a small town, probably about 7 miles away from where Mark grew up. We didn't know each other. I'm a lot older.
That explains
a lot better looking, that type of stuff. But anyway, so long story short, we kind of grew up in a similar culture, and similar, what's considered norm or acceptable and that type of thing. And so, first of all, I have to say, this is, again, the best podcast interview backdrop I think I've ever seen. Like this, what you see right now with Mark.
This is the calming 1973 F-100.
Yes, it's beautiful. I mean, like, totally, you couldn't have picked a better backdrop to capture our youth, really. You know what I mean? Yeah. But along with that, so one thing that I truly understand and am sensitive to is that, and again, this conversation is going to go a few different directions, but when it comes to mental health, in regular, rural America or even the big cities and that type of thing, there's so many stigmas attached to it. You know what I mean? I know, there were some things that I struggled with growing up, and back then it was, buck up, man up, shake it off, get busy, go do something. And so I appreciate the odds that, that was kind of stacked up against you to at least get to that point. You know what I mean? And I noticed that when you made your post on Facebook too, when you were talking about like, well, I'm just going to go out and go shooting. And then all of a sudden, my wife is worried about me. Like, that's a hard realization. So what was it about this particular time? Because it sounds like this has been going on for a long time. What was it about this time that kind of made, this sounds like it was a big turning point for you?
Well, like I said before, it was almost like a spiritual puberty, which kind of sounds funny, but it was a bit of an awakening for me. It was, life's not supposed to be this way. I'm not supposed to feel this down and out and broken. And it was, I've been taught things, but it never sank in. Sure. And so I had a lot of mentors, a lot of people in my life who taught me really good principles and taught me a lot of really good things. That doesn't mean it always sank in. And on a foundational level, something as foundational as hope, like that changes everything. I mean, that's not just some principle that, is going to change a few things in your life. I mean, that changes every single aspect of your life.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm feeling that now, where it's not just my mental health, it's my physical health, it's my spiritual health. Like everything hinges on that.
Yep. It was interesting when Gary was mentioning, you probably were dealing with a long time. I heard you a little sip. It goes, oh, not really. It wasn't that long. And it was one of those things that there were so many things that were pressing upon you. You had your promotion. You had all these kids. You have a new house. And
it was a lot.
Yeah. And it's funny because people would say, that's success, baby. That's success. Yeah. And the emotional toll, and I see this a lot in a lot of the athletes that I've interviewed in the past, and all of a sudden they go, yeah, but there's quite a bit of an emotional toll I wasn't ready for. And that's where the self-destruct happens, because to your point, they miss out on the balance aspect of it, your spiritual, mental, social, all that other good stuff right there. Yeah. And I think it's an easy trap to fall into. And it's something that, again, it was only in a span of a couple of years, it sounds like, when all of that started to happen. So I'm just glad that realization happened and that you hit that spiritual purity, understanding that hopelessness. But just wondering, that I guess that's a long way to ask the question. What would you recommend or actually, what would you say are some of the warning signs that you wish you would have known? And what would you recommend when so many life changes are happening in a person's life, like you experienced?
Maybe be careful what you wish for. Like you said, success is great. You know, it is great, but you got to make sure you want it. I mean, you really gotta have a passion for what you're doing, just to get to what looks like success. To have a family and a house and a good job and all those things, that's not enough. You have to believe in what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I just kind of went with the flow. There was always like this expectation to be a certain kind of person, to be, you know, a certain kind of member of society and all these things. And I was living for everybody else. I wasn't living for me.
Oh,
Uh,
that is a
and
common theme, man.
yeah, it's hard. It is hard not to live for everybody else.
It is.
Well, yeah, and basically making those choices or doing it because either that's what you're expected to do, that's what you were told to do, but it really comes down to it. What, you know, it's sometimes hard to say, well, what's best for me?
Right.
You know, what's going to make me happy? What's going to make my family happy?
And me and you had hit on that, like living more intentionally, like doing things because my heart's in it, not because somebody else thinks I should do it.
Yes.
Sure.
That's been
Well,
like,
let's step back just a little bit. So again, you know, I've had experiences in my life where there was no hope there, you know, where things were rough. You know, the thing that I want to really understand is how do you, it's easy to say and recognize, okay, I need hope. It's a whole nother level when you're feeling down and when you're feeling, you know, the world is closing in on you. What did you do? I mean, it's easy just to say, well, yeah, I mean, I also need $1 million, but I'm in the position I'm at, I can't do it. Or, you know what I mean? How do you go from having no hope to making those first steps? Like for you, what happened?
it was, and I didn't know all this, you know, during the moment. Like I got out of that meeting with behavioral health people, and I was like, okay, I'm not that, like I'm not again, I'm not broken. Like I'm not needing
Sure.
to be, yeah. And it was, but there was this realization that I didn't look forward to anything. We went to dinner after that, and I was like, what do I look forward to? Like, what would I look forward to? So that was the change in direction that my mind was going. And so I started looking for something until I felt something that I could latch onto. And it was actually, as we were talking, it was a vacation, it was a getaway, and it was my wife and myself to just go get a hotel and spend the night away from kids and responsibility and the rest of the world and just reset. And so then it was like a 2-week thing that we planned, and it was something to look forward to. So that was, it was tiny. I mean, it was such a small thing, but it was just something to look forward to. It was one thing that I knew that I would enjoy. And then realizing the build up to that was as enjoyable as the actual vacation or staycation or whatever you want to call it. But you have to have things to look forward to in life. And even if it's 2 weeks away or 6 months away, I'd gone a long time between doing things I enjoyed and looking forward to the next thing in life. So it was just a small thing to latch onto.
So that was the initial spark, huh?
Yeah. It was a crawl. I mean, it was not a step, it was a crawl.
You did say something that was pretty cool. Not only are you looking forward to it, you brought to mind a conversation I had with an ecclesiastical leader one time, and what he said was, the guy was so spiritual. So this might be a little bit off, but he goes, I knew one guy that everything they did was all spiritual. It was about the church. It was about this, and he had no balance. And so one time he was wondering why his life was falling apart and such. And he said, when's the last time you had quality time with your family? And so this ecclesiastical leader said, I know you like coming to church. I know you keep the Sabbath day holy, all this other good stuff like this. And, you know, this is not a religious program whatsoever, but it was interesting. And he said, take Sunday off and take your kids to the pancake house and see what happens. And that it was awesome, because what he did was he took his family, he felt like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get struck down. And in reality, what happened is he went over, and it was one of the most quality filled, purposeful, meaningful family events ever. And it was a simple pancake house, for heck's sake. And after that, they came back, and all of a sudden their quality of relationship was at another level, because the family felt that they were much more important than anything else, and everything was a supplement to that. There was true balance again, and not only was it found purpose for this individual, it was also found purpose for entire family. Like, oh, holy cruelly, man, dad cares. It was interesting.
That's something I've noticed is when I'm doing well, then I can be a benefit to other people. And like when you're talking, I'm thinking of my dad always taught me about the sharpening the chain analogy. I think it was a Stephen Covey thing, but you got to get away. You got to get away and sharpen your chain, or else you're just going to be hacking away at stuff forever, and it's just not going to get you the right results. It's much better to step back and like I say, a vacation can do wonders for people if they're not all stressed out and depressed. And you have to go with the right mindset. You actually have to sharpen the chain. You can't just say you're going to sharpen the chain.
Yep.
All right, well, we're going to take a pause right here. And so anybody that's listening to this, get your wife, get your significant other, your family, whatever, plan it, go do something, reconnect. All right, that's everybody's assignment. Anyway, continue.
But you bring up another point, because when this interview was first brought to me, I thought, wow, this is a story about overcoming depression. Mark, you never had a depression problem, man.
No,
you really didn't. It was just a realization, like, what the crud is scratching at me right now, to where I don't get it. And then when you had that realization, because people were already diagnosing you as, I'm depressed, he's depressed, you got to be on meds, all that stuff. And it's so funny, because when I was at Arizona State, I had a person, a good buddy of mine, that they put him on antidepressants, and it made him worse. And then he stopped, and then we started playing and doing some pretty fun stuff. And it was another realization. I didn't need that junk. I didn't need all this diagnosis stuff. Not saying that those evaluations are worthless by any means, but it's definitely something that we need to relook at different things.
It's not for everyone. It's really not.
No, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I think that that's the hard thing. And I'm just to give a little perspective from my point is, I don't want this to kind of just be about mental health, because that's not why I want to do this interview, because there's other stuff about, kind of Mark's story that I really do want to focus on. But the struggle with mental health is like, so I'm an RN, I'm in healthcare, that type of thing. If I break my arm, I can look down on my arm and go, dang it, I broke my arm. That sucks. Mm-hmm. And I'll get a cast. They'll reset it, do whatever they need to do. With mental health, when it's the computer that you think with, you can't do that. You can't step out and look at your own mind. So nobody in a million years would say, shake off that broken arm,
yep.
Or you're sinning and that's why it's broken, or there's all these different reasons that society has as to why you're broken. You know what I mean? And so when you're talking about, again, it's super, super complicated at every case is so different. For some people, medication absolutely is the answer. For some people, therapy is the answer. For some people, and I'm even of the opinion that, like, man, if you have to try 2 or 3 different things at the same time to get to the answer, man, do it. You know what I mean? But anyway, that's my little side rant on mental health. It's just
a side rant, man.
It is. It's so super complicated, but it just jams up so many people in our society. But with you, Mark, again, I almost kind of agree with Maurice, is like, you almost were living kind of quote unquote the American dream, but without knowing it, it was kind of like the American nightmare in a way. And then, it was because of this meeting, you and your wife went out, you did some stuff, it gave you that hope. And so what I would like to kind of push on next, or kind of pry out of you, is I know you ended up looking at you, you're a different person. You're half the man you used to be. You're 70 pounds lighter. This crazy guy rides his bike to work every day. It's how many miles?
It's 10 each way.
10 each way. He works out every day. He's just, it's awesome. But you've also made this amazing emotional transformation. And I think for me, that's what's really interesting. And so if you don't mind, let's kind of go off on that in that direction a little bit, because you've changed completely the way that you interact with people and the world and everything.
So, and we touched on that a little bit today about being an introvert. Like I'm heavily introverted. I think in my mind I am. And I've always been the one to kind of be in the back and just observant and watching. And that's always just been my MO. I mean, that's always been who I am. And I've realized as I become an adult, like you can't just sit back and let things happen. Like you're responsible for so many people, including yourself. And it's the weight of that responsibility was a curse for a minute, but it's a huge blessing to realize that I have responsibilities, empowers me. I mean, I have to step up and do something with those. I can't just, let things go away. My conscience wouldn't let me neglect those responsibilities. And so just figuring out the person I need to be to shoulder that stuff. And I think it's being at the base of the mountain looking up, like it's just sitting there, your face in your hands, just not wanting to grow up and take responsibility. But it's like once you start doing it, you're like, this is where I'm supposed to be. This is exactly what I'm supposed to be doing.
Right.
And it's fulfillment. I mean, you go from just feeling down and out and not wanting to take care of anything or do anything to all of a sudden it's doing everything I can to be the best that I can in every aspect of my life. And making sure I am balanced and not being burnt out and all those things. It's just a whole different lifestyle.
No, there's another thing that you pulled up too, and this is ironically, you brought up Cubby, right? The sharpen the saw, sharpen the chain, and all that. And we interviewed his son a couple weeks ago, and it's interesting because he said that one of the things that it's funny because this parallels a lot of the things that he talked about. One of the statistics that he brought up was about 1 in 3 of every young woman is going through a self-identity problem. And that is only exacerbated by the fact that social media starts to put everything. And so all of a sudden you're living for someone else instead of who you are. And it just multiplies that feeling of isolation and such. And it seems that the things that you brought out about being balanced, about doing it for yourself, about making sure that you're doing something with a passion, and then because you're doing it with passion, then you get so stoked that you're automatically helping other people, like you had mentioned. I think you just found the secret sauce, man. I really do. I don't care if you're introvert or not. This is really good. This is really good food for the soul, if you will.
And I've been getting that feedback from people where it's like, man, this is so good to hear. And it didn't come by chance. I mean, there was a lot of prayers, there was a lot of struggle. I mean, it wasn't just flopped in my lap. But it was it's been a rough road to get to this point, and I just got to maintain it.
Yeah, no doubt. I love it.
Well, and I think part of the success that I've seen, just kind of looking in, is you've made a lot of changes on how you view yourself and how you conduct yourself. But it also seems to me that you've made a lot of changes in your perspective towards other people. And that's had a huge impact on you. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So when I started getting physically healthier, that helped with the mental stuff. The mental stuff naturally started getting better when I just started being more optimistic and looking towards things. But my spirituality also improved. I mean, I was studying more, I was reading more, I was looking for good things. It was no longer about just watching the next thing on Netflix, but I was reading books, and I listen to tons of podcasts and stuff now, which I never did that kind of stuff before. And I had read a verse that had basically said the thing of most worth, and this is, again, he said not a religious podcast, but the thing of most worth is to bring souls to Christ. And if you ignore religion and you're not religious at all, the thing of most worth is to help other people, whatever that looks like in your environment or your world. That hit me like a ton of bricks. It was, of all the things I can do in this life, whether it's helping my wife or my kids or my coworkers, it doesn't matter who it is. Like, that's the thing of most worth in this life, is to help other people.
And I think one of the things that is an addendum to that, if I will, and you could slap me down and say you're completely wrong, but it goes into the mask effect on the airplane. You remember when the airplane said, put your mask on first? You got to take care of yourself too. Otherwise, you're going to burn out and helping other people along the way, right? And so,
and giving that help with bitterness in your hearts, you're not giving much. If you're not doing it willingly, you're not really doing it.
Yep, exactly. Matter of fact, I heard, ironically, I heard a talk, and the individual says, become better, not bitter.
Well, and I think it also, you're saying that, I don't know how you just mentioned, but we also had that podcast and where we had an individual that was helping people with cancer. I mean, one of the most righteous, like, best things you could possibly be doing. Yeah. But even with that, he eventually burned out. Big time. You know what I mean? And so even if it's the good things that we're doing in life or the bad or whatever else, we still have to have that balance, and we still have to have that self-care. Even once you put that oxygen on, no matter what your intent is, you can't rip it off and still be of help to the people that, that are around you. You know what I mean? So one of the things when you were talking, Mark, that kind of hit me a little bit is, and I don't know why, I'm just going to throw this out there. Maybe it's a talking point. Maybe it's not. I think one of the biggest disservices, in my opinion, is the golden rule. And this is going to sound kind of weird. And again, I don't know where this came from, but so Maurice, what's the golden rule?
Do unto others as you would have them do to you.
Correct. I think that's horrible. I think that's probably one of the worst things that we could ever do. And let me explain why. So somewhere somebody was talking about that, and they said they believe in, I guess it's the platinum rule or whatever, but it's basically do unto others as they would want. How does it go? As do unto them as they would want it to be done to them. I don't know if that makes, I mean, that I completely slaughtered that.
The way that I had heard it is that do unto others means like you'd have to do unto them. I like chocolate ice cream. I'm going to give you chocolate ice cream.
Yeah, whether you like it or not.
Chocolate ice cream, man. They want pina colada.
Yeah. And so I think with that comes a lot of responsibility, where you have to have empathy towards other people. You have to have empathy for their upbringing, their experiences, their genetics, whatever it might be. And I know, Mark, that you kind of schooled me on that when we were talking here a couple of weeks ago. Kind of just that balance of perspective and empathy. Talk about that a little bit, if you don't mind. I'm kind of putting you on the spot.
As you're talking, I'm thinking this is simple to me. This is, you just love people. Like, you love them in their environment, whatever they're doing, good or bad, whatever it is. If you truly love people, you're going to help them. I mean, you're going to just reach out because you love them, not because you're getting something back, or not because it looks good on Facebook, or not because, again, it goes to that people pleasing thing. Like, we're all doing things, not all of us, a lot of us are doing things because we want to be viewed in a certain way. But it's better to be a certain way. It's better to be what you, like, be that person instead of pretending to be that person. And like you say, if do unto others as you would do unto yourself or whatever, if you hate yourself, you're going to expect other people to treat you poorly. Yeah. And if you care for yourself, then you can love somebody. But if you hate yourself, it's pretty hard to love other people.
Mm-hmm. Great.
So it sounds like part of that is figure yourself out, but then also double check your motives.
Yeah.
It sounds to me like what you're saying. You know, why is it that I'm treating other people this way, or why is it that, you know, when I approach this conversation, this is how I view it, or I have to be right, or anything like that. So
Yeah, I said the other day, like, I don't need to be right. Like, I have that is not a desire of mine. Like, we could sit here and debate things, but at the end of the day, like, we all believe different things. I mean, you and I, even being raised in similar situations, like, we view the world so differently. My own family, my own brothers, like, we have just completely different views of the world. And a lot of the things are similar, but it's everyone's view is so different.
yeah, it's kind of frustrating to me that the tendency in today's society is diversity is a bad thing. You know, I look back to Maurice, I look back when we were in college, and man, we just had like the funnest group of the most diverse people you could probably think of.
It's crazy.
Yeah, yeah. I look back. I remember in my study group, I had a Muslim,
a big
Iranian Muslim
guy. You had this little Japanese guy, and it wasn't me, I promise.
Yeah, there was another little Asian guy.
You had a country bumpkin from, I can't remember where he was from.
Yeah.
You had
New York Jew.
You had one of the girls was
stripper.
I can't remember her name. You had another wrestler from ASU. It was it was amazing. Yeah.
But yeah, there was we had a stripper in my study group. A New York Jew, Iranian Muslim.
Yep.
You know, and to me that was awesome. And you know, it was really, really cool. And I, you know, we talked a little bit about today, Mark, is sometimes it's even just expanding the people that you not only interact with, but also I'm also a huge believer in just getting out. You know what I mean? So getting out of our environment. Like you guys went on that staycation. I don't know how far away you went, but you just sometimes just getting out of the environment that you're in at the moment, just gives you kind of resets your perspective. You know what I mean?
I heard something the other day. A guy was talking, and he said, "How do you get out of a rut? Like if you're four-wheeling and your truck's stuck in a ditch, like how do you get out of the rut? You say you jerk the wheel, like you do something extreme to get out. Like sometimes you just got to do what it takes to get out of it."
Yeah. So in your story, what were some of? Give us the top drastic moves that you made that had some of the biggest impact. I know you've touched on some of them.
Exercise was definitely that was one of those things where it was like, I'm not doing good. I gotta kick it into gear and do some exercising. And that was really up and down in the beginning. I had the desire, but I didn't keep the motivation. So that was it was back and forth, and I would do good and then I would do bad. And then I heard something that said consistency is more important than intensity. And man, that hit me. And I was like, I just got to do a little bit every day. And a little bit turns into a lot really quick. Like people are looking at me like I'm crazy. And I'm like, yeah, but I worked up to this. I didn't just all of a sudden get to this point. But it's consistency, you know? And then just, I don't know if there was extreme changes. Everything was small. Everything was a little bit here and a little bit there. I've got a supportive family, sisters. I had a sister that I was texting a lot. And that led to more writing, actually. And then the writing was something that I did kind of in the beginning and kind of throughout. And then I realized that writing for me is a huge weakness, but it's also something that I don't know if it brings peace, but it brings clarity to mind. Like I know what I'm thinking when I'm writing. And so then I can have more introspection than I do normally. And that's been writing has probably been one of the biggest changes that I've made in my life.
Yeah, a lot of introspection for sure. Yeah.
Well, I think that's, you know, I look at it as well as I see what you've been, you know, kind of been doing on Facebook and that type of thing is, you know, that's also going to be gold for your kids in the future, you know, as they're growing up in a difficult society, and it's, you know what I mean? Yeah. They probably have some of the same DNA, surprisingly, that you do. And for so, sure. You know, it's going to be cool that you already have kind of that how-to guide, you know, not just by example, but they can go and read, You know what I mean? That's something where Maurice is really good. He writes everything down. We were reminiscing back to the 90s, and it was like, holy cow, you know, but you know.
Yeah, you'll be in the journal tonight, Mark. Watch out.
You've now been like, you're in, man. You're in. So I don't know, one of the things I would suggest is you know, is start, I mean, Facebook is great, but I'm not thinking, you know, maybe like a blog or something, man. You have a lot to offer.
Well,
You
it's getting longer, and I try to keep them short because nobody wants to read a 3-page Facebook post. But
You'd actually be surprised.
They're just my thought of the day right now, and I told Gary earlier, like, English was my weakness. I'm more of a math guy, and so writing for me is kind of a joke. Like, you can see my grammar and stuff. It's I learned to write in the 3rd grade, and it kind of stayed the same. But it again, not being worried about judgment, it was just like, you know what, I don't have the best writing skills, but I can make some sentences.
Yeah, I feel your pain, man. I feel everyone thinks I know math.
Come on, Maurice, you got to know math. I mean, come on.
I'm awful.
Yeah, well, you know, and I do appreciate that. Like you said, is once you don't care, or you know what I mean, or you're not guided by what other people think you should be or what you should be doing. That is so empowering. You know what I mean? And the thing that I've been kind of excited about, like with Stoke Meter, is being able to bring people together and kind of creating that community. We talked a little bit about it today in our discussion, was, you know, a lot of times it's the kids that have empathy. It's the kids that are nice. It's the kids that truly care are the ones that get trampled in society. You know what I mean? They're the ones that kind of get crushed in the grind. You know what I mean? And so that's why I think kind of, you know, this type of stuff and getting your story out and starting to document this type of stuff is so important, and building that community. You know what I mean? Already I'm like, okay, you know, we need to introduce Mark to the, you know, this guy and this, you know what I mean? Like, we start building that synergistic momentum.
And Mark, the way that I can already tell you're a nice guy, and I know that you have a heart that is meant to help other people, and the stuff that Gary said on the nice kids get trashed over, all right, and such. It's interesting because there was another thing that I think you exude very well. There was a book by an organizational psychologist named Adam Grant, and he did a study on people that were givers and people were takers, and they did an assessment, and they found that the people that were takers were the ones that succeeded in organizations. And then you thought that was it, but that was only one piece of it. Over time, it was the givers that were the ones that were always the ones that excelled, because people knew that they can always go to them. They needed to hide things from the takers because they didn't trust them and such. And so, yeah, you might have got ran over. All of us might have gotten run over when we were nice, but then in the end, I mean, I've seen Karcher dragged through the mud. He's seen me dragged through the mud, and it's obvious you've been dragged through the mud. But at the very end, you come to the realization, I'm not here to impress anyone else. All of a sudden, you're nice again.
well, it's funny you say that, Maurice, too. Is I also am a firm believer that whatever level of kind of horribleness or whatever you want to call it in your life, that also is proportional to the amount of good and joy and success that you can have as well. You know, I won't mention names, but Maurice and I hung out with someone that Daddy was always there to catch, you know, to give anything he needed. There was any sort of struggle, they were right there to catch him. There were, you know, and but man, the guy didn't have any real happiness in his life. You know, I mean, there wasn't that, you know. So I guess what I'm saying is, at some point, I'm kind of glad that for the times we've been dragged through the mud, all three of us, you know what I mean, through the hard times, because man, on the back end, it's pretty awesome.
And I'm not gonna lie, it sucks while you're going through it. Always does.
Yeah. So I again, that's kind of what I look at like with Stoke Meter, and that's why I'm excited about it, is kind of creating that community and bringing people, like-minded people together, and another thing too that kind of seems to be a reoccurring theme, and I've seen this in you, Mark, is many times people, if they find something negative about someone, they just cancel them and they're done and they don't want anything to do with them. Whereas I think a real emotionally mature person can look at someone, regardless of their background or situation, and take the good and integrate it. And Maurice, we've had some podcasts where that's kind of a recurring theme as well.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
All the time, man. All the time. And this goes from UFC coaches to someone that started their own company to a regular guy down the street. It's amazing. It really is.
Yeah. And you've said that's kind of a big part of who you are now too, Mark, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I kind of followed that, but I think again, it just goes back to loving people. Yep. I mean, because I talked about the imposter syndrome on Facebook a little bit too. And it's like, if you're an introvert and you don't socialize well, it's really easy to cut people out. Yeah. And if you don't like yourself and you're an introvert, like, you're going to isolate yourself. I mean, it's not going to lead you to social groups. But as we kind of figure ourselves out, whether you're introvert or extrovert or whatever you are, it's like, you need people. Like, you got to have people in your life. Like, you can't do this alone.
Sure. Well, and I think a big part of that, and this kind of goes back to our discussion with Stephen Covey, Maurice,
Sean Covey,
Sean Covey, and also with we're talking about kids and youth and that type of thing. And that's always been kind of an area that I'm interested in. Is a lot of times it takes someone affirming someone else. You know what I mean? So if you have say your kids, they might be an introvert as well, and they might, it's so important that we have people in our life that affirm us, that give us like, hey man, you're doing a good job. You know what I mean? There's so much power in that. You know what I mean? Maurice has been that for me over the years. You know what I mean? Like, dude, you're rocking it, or whatever it is. And so I don't know. I think there's a lot of power in that as well. And I think it's also ageless. I don't think you just have to be a kid. You know what I mean? So,
there's even conversations at work where you're like, dude, you're not the same person. I'm like, I've been getting that a lot, but it reaffirms and makes me feel good that I'm, that it's obvious that things have changed.
Oh yeah.
But it's huge.
Yeah, and at the same time, you were a really awesome person before. That's what's so, that's what's so crazy. You know what I mean? It's like you went from good to just being like, holy crap, kicking butt, man.
No, but I think this is a good segue into a conclusion here. Just there's so many recurring themes here that I think people will start to take away and understand. And I thank you for that, Mark. It's I know Gary called it vulnerable. I'm just saying you're a freaking stud, man. for doing that.
Like I say, when he asked me, my first thought was like, heck no, I'm not doing a podcast.
Yeah.
Well, I guess my only request is, first of all, thanks, Mark. I really do appreciate you coming on here. I know this wasn't absolutely comfortable for you, but at the same time, as we work together and that type of thing, as we have conversations, at this point, I would ask you, as we kind of come up or talk about specific topics, would you be willing to come on later on and talk about more specific kind of topics?
For sure.
Awesome.
Cool. I figured you could say no. You're like under the gun right now.
Not only that, you're natural at it too. And I think I hope you realize that. So
I'm getting there.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, man. We really appreciate your time.
Big time.
Thank you.
Take care of that 73 Ford, man. See ya.